don't know how many of you know this, but for each and every game that West Ham play, David Moyes has to do 2 press conferences. No wonder he gets quite annoyed, right? One is for the broadcast press, Sky TV, BT, basically TV and radio. The other one is for the written press. He literally sits down with 2 separate sets of people. I did know this, but I guess I just sort of forgot it along the way. What I've got now is basically the transcript from the interview that he did with the written press. There's nothing overly groundbreaking. He talks a little about David Sullivan, a little bit about Declan Rice. Really interesting some of the timing of the things that he said, particularly with regard to talking to David Sullivan. Actually, it's well, I'll get to. I'll read it to you in a second. If you've heard the stuff that he said when he said he wasn't an expert on Fulham and that sort of thing, that was from the broadcast stuff. So I'm guessing a lot of you won't have heard this. You may have read it little bits and pieces of it, but here's the whole lot. I'm going to read it all because it can actually be quite boring. So I've sort of gone through it and tried to pick out the bits which might be interesting. Hey, look, it's match day. We're going to have to we've got to kill some time right before. Well, hopefully you join myself and Gio at 12:55. No, it's not 12. 1:55, of course. Hour and 5 minutes before kickoff for the Fulham game over on the main channel. So I look forward to seeing you there. And up until then, he was basically asked if he was tempted to give the players a rollicking. He said, yeah. He actually didn't say yes or no. He said, you've got to do things differently sometimes. You know what Moyes is like. He can be a little bit cryptic. But I'll tell you what I did. I'm sort of been looking for snippets. So he was basically saying, players police themselves. They know they let themselves down. Well, at least you would hope that they would do anyway. That's what David Moyes said. He said, but also over the years, we've had Mark Noble in the dressing room, and he would certainly have policed them and organised them. We're still in a little bit of a changeover period. We've got a great young captain, but maybe still got a bit to go. When he says maybe still got a bit, it means he's still got a bit to go. As far as all the other sides of the game as well. That will come with age and experience. But overall, they don't need to be told off too much. They know how it went. Now, I found that quite interesting, particularly as he's alluding to Declan Rice being young and not having, maybe every skill that you would need as a captain. He's not criticising him, he's praising, but sometimes you can damn someone with faint praise, can't you? And it does sort of beg the question, where he's talking about, how he's going to be better in the future, but this is his captain for now, and he knows he's leaving. Anyway, so that I found interesting. He was asked if Rice was the last one off the pitch and he stayed to applaud fans, but Declan Rice looked upset. That was a question from a journalist. David Moyes said we were all upset because we didn't play well enough on the night. Quite a few individual errors meant it looked a lot worse than it should have been on the night. Let's be fair, we're still playing against a side who's positive and doing well this year. We made it look a lot easier than it should have been. Okay, I mean, fair enough. The reason I find that interesting is there was quite a lot of individual errors, because later on he's going to go and say, I have to take the blame, but he's not then. By the way, I don't disagree. I do think it was loads of individual errors. I'm just sort of pointing it out, really there. The journalists have asked one of the questions they certainly should have been asking, reports on your future. Basically say, can I eat away at you, they asked him. He said, of course you'd rather it be the other way. You'd rather people be talking about you positively. That would always be good, but I have to be fair to you boys in the press and everyone else who's always spoken incredibly positively about me over the last few years because of the success and improvement I've had at West Ham. But I also have to take my medicine, and I know when I'm not doing well, I expect to be spoken about less well. I don't take it personally, I take it as part of the job because I'm a wee bit older, more experienced and more comfortable in my own shoes. And I'm better at handling it and putting it into perspective. He's then asked, what about David Sullivan? They're talking about pressure, this is the context of it. He was very curt, very short with it. They said, and David Sullivan, he said, I spoke to him Thursday morning. That's it. And then the journalist turned around and said, all good? That was the return question. All good, David? And then David Moyes said, yeah, all good. David Sullivan is all fine, but I'm no different. I'll tell you why it's interesting. I spoke to him Thursday morning. That was the very morning that David Sullivan was speaking to everyone in the press. So it doesn't... I mean, we haven't got to be Sherlock Holmes to work it out. He's basically spoken to David Moyes on Thursday morning, then gone and briefed all the press about... And that's where we saw the stuff coming out, and then we've since learned that there may have been an inquiry made to Brendan Rodgers, who's turned around and said, I'm taking a break for the rest of the season, need some time off. So I just find that really, really interesting that they've had that conversation, and then there was a lot of press. David Sullivan did a lot of press stuff on Thursday morning, which is obviously the morning after the game. I found that really interesting. Anyway, so David Moyes said, yeah, all good. David Sullivan's all fine, but I'm no different. You lose the games, you can lose your job. And West Ham could do that, no problem. I mean, that West Ham could sack him because we've not got ourselves in a good enough position. But let's be fair, where we are right now, if we finish the season and we stay up and we get into European final, you might start saying, hey, by the way, that's not been a bad season for West Ham. So we're really on the cusp. It can go either way now. It's on the cusp. It could go one way or the other. It's a really fine balancing act at the moment. I mean, yes, I mean, he's right. I mean, it is on the cusp, suggests you're on the cusp of something good or cusp of something bad. And I guess, but he's only really speaking about if that happens. Yeah, you might say it's a good season. I mean, it is tough, and it is tough for him to answer these questions. I do get that. But I mean, he's still looking at it positively, staying up and... Well, he's not said winning it, is it? Reaching a final, staying up and reaching a final. A lot of people are banking on it. I had a really interesting comment on yesterday's video, actually. And when I mentioned it, somebody said I mentioned about him not having won. How can he be compared to Brendan Rodgers? So when Brendan Rodgers has won a trophy, won the cup at Leicester, and obviously won trophies at Celtic. I said, how can you compare someone that's won trophies with somebody that's had 1,000 games and not won a trophy and not won any silverware? And in the comments, yeah, it's fine. He wasn't rude. He wasn't anything at all. And he actually meant what he said. He said, well, hold on. He said David Moyes might win the Conference League this season, so that's one piece of silverware. And I think this is something I see that's quite prevalent. Even David Moyes doing it. You got to win it, haven't you? You can't bank it. You can't class it. You can't say this has been a good season, because actually if you don't win the cup, then it's been a bad season, and what you're asking for people to do is take all the nuance and detail out of it. It's almost like a yes or no answer. It's almost like, and I hear a lot of people do it, like we're going to get to the end of the season, there's going to be yes or no answer, and someone's going to say, oh, was that a good season? And you're going to start to explain it, and then someone's going, oh, no, yes or no, was it a good season? Well, let me just explain the detail. No, yes or no, was it a good season? And it's funny, because that's an online way. People don't speak like that in real life. You will get to have a nuance, you'll get to have a conversation. The way a lot of people are conversing online is not how you would do it in real life. And I do find that, yes, if someone were to put a gun to your head and you stayed in the Premier League and you won the Conference League, would you say it was a good... yes, okay. If I'm not allowed to say about all the months I was worried and all the other stuff and all the things that could have been done, yes, okay. And I think it's you can do that with anything, can't you? You can strip all the detail out of anything. This is interesting. Well, I think it is anyway. The journalist said, you have said in the past that whenever a match has been labelled must not lose, that the club have responded. Does that show the players are playing for you? This is interesting. Gio was speaking about this in the video. Well, he speaks about it all the time, of course, which is, he gets a game he shouldn't lose. It's a must not lose game. He wins it and it rolls on it. It kicks the can down the road. David Moyes said, that is the sort... Hey, listen to this. Basically, this is David Moyes' answer. That is a sort of shitty question you're asking me there, because you're suggesting that maybe they are not. Basically, just the end of that, it basically says, does that show that the players are playing for you? That's what they're saying. The journalist's saying to him, because you win these must-win games, does that show the players are playing for you? He's turned around and said, that's a shitty question. I actually used that, not my words, David Moyes' words. You're asking me because you're suggesting that maybe they are not. Well, actually, he wasn't. The journalist was suggesting that they were. He said, what I'm saying, and this is what he says, what I'm saying back to you, to the journalist, is that the players are playing. They are fantastic. The other night, for all their mistakes, they were fantastic. They did all they could to get to the last bell. They've been really good players. They've been really good for 2 or 3 years. I think for me, I am saying that would be something for me that is not a question. What? Well, it is a question. He just asked you the question. And then he gets asked about siege mentality in the dressing room. I don't think there's too much about that. Basically, how important is Declan Rice in the situation? He says hugely important. He's such a good player. We want him to play well. He's not enjoying this. None of us are. I said we've built expectations to be better. At the moment, we've not reached those expectations. He basically speaks in cliches and riddles. He's asked if he feels fortunate. He said, yes, I do. I can say as a past, there's been a history and people maybe have to look at the board and have thought that they're not good. Basically, he's suggesting that the board don't back their managers. He said, but if I was recommending to any potential managers, meaning that might win the West Ham job, I would say that they're a good board to work for. They support you, they stick with you, and all the things that matter. They've been incredibly supportive. And then the journalist asks why, and David Moyes says, I think you know the answer to that. My opinion is probably that West Ham have had the best 2 or 3 years that they've had in most of your lifetimes. People forget too easily about Europe. I'll go on with the rest. I don't agree. Again, it's an easy argument. That's a shutdown argument. I'm going to criticise David Moyes because of the league this year. You've forgotten about Europe. No, I haven't. I would call that an internet argument. It's not actually a real one. He can have it in a press conference because it's not actually a conversation. It's a Q&A, and they get to answer a question. He answers it, then basically the I can't think of, the press officer will then turn around and say, next question. It's not a conversation. So it's just a statement. People, you West Ham fans, you forget about Europe. No, not at all. We speak about it all the time, actually. It's the nuance, it's the detail being dragged out of it. Anyway, he goes on to speak about Europe, spirit. He's asked about changes. He said basically he's going to swap up the team quite a lot. Talks about making 4 subs. He likes to make subs. He says, what do you say? We're probably always going to make a couple of subs and changes around the 60-minute mark. Because I'd like to do that in games. We've seen it more and more now because we've had 5 subs. I mean, there's a lot of cliche, a lot of riddle. There's not that much more interesting stuff. He does, as I say, talks about the spirit, talks about approaching games differently. He doesn't seem too keen to do that. I mean, very much says, we've got a way of playing. I think with the substitutes we can look to change things off the bench. So I think you got your answer there, really. He said we shouldn't make changes just for the sake of it. I do think the use of subs will become more relevant as we go on. He's also mentioned that he's told players who are worried, so he's semi-admitted that players go up to him and worried about not playing. He's reassured the players are not playing, that they'll have plenty of time to feature because there are lots of games. No big surprise there. Anyway, there you go. Thought I would share that with you. Sorry, it's never an easy video when you're reading. Maybe a bit jumbled, but I thought you might be interesting. Half a bit at a time. Probably gone and done something else. But might not even be watching this. If you are, I'm not even speaking to you. I'm speaking to someone else that is watching it. Hey, crazy stuff. Hour and 5 minutes before kick-off. Join me and Gio. Big game, right?